It's such a great opportunity for me to be in front of you. I'm so amazed. Listening to the list of countries that you all represent, it's incredible. It's incredible to see, actually, that something that we started at the campus of Stanford was just a conference with a simple goal of putting only women on stage has grown to become this global community, a global movement, as you all represent. So this year marks a very special year. It's not just our 10th anniversary. This year, we're starting to take WIDS worldwide. We're going global. So instead of just doing one conference in Stanford, we've decided to do conferences around the world. So earlier this year, in coordination with the International Women's Day, our first collaboration occurred with WIDS Cambridge. So with Harvard and MIT and Microsoft sponsoring that conference, we held our first event in collaboration with the local ambassador team. And then we followed that up with an event that was an executive level forum sponsored by Bain and Consulting. And then after that, one day at Stanford, where we heard students speak and talk about all the wonderful research that they were doing. And this is another collaboration with a local ambassador team with Puget Sound. And who knows where we're going to go next? And you will all hear what our decision is. We're targeting on doing one more before the end of the calendar year. So what we are doing this year that's different is we're realizing that we'll make greater impact by collaborating with our ambassador teams around the world. We are a very small team, right? And we are all based in the Bay Area, Denver, and in Bend, Oregon. And in fact, I'd like my teammates to stand up and introduce themselves. Shelley Darnesser, say hello. And Shauna Morgan. And Brianna Morgan, please stand up. Yeah, so find out more about our team, but our team is very small. The work gets done by all of you and all of our wonderful ambassadors around the world. Okay, I think it's working now. Okay, so our mission is focused on cultivating the next generation of leaders in data science and AI. And we're starting with younger students. And we're supporting them, creating an environment where they can learn and connect with mentors as they go through their career journey. And as I reflect on my own career journey, there are some key moments that clearly created a different career trajectory. And I wanted to share those moments with you and share the lessons I learned. So I started my career armed with 2 degrees in engineering, and I worked for a company that my initial role was working on developing credit scoring models, right? So I was confident, I got my degrees, I was prepared to tackle the real world out there. And soon enough, it became pretty obvious that getting an education in engineering, whatever, technical skills will get you just so far, right? And my managers, my mentors said to me, there's some soft skills you need to learn, right? And I loved working with clients around the world. I loved working on client projects and just getting out there and learning from my clients. And what are these soft skills, I wondered, right? Well, you have to do some presentations. You have to get on stage, right? And talk about what you're doing and educate the clients and hope that they use the models that you develop. So this was frightening for me. Maybe because English is not my first language, so I had that constantly going through my mind. Maybe because I was born into a culture where spotlight, right? In fact, it was discouraged for women. So I had all that going on in back of my head, yet to do my job well, I had to get on stage. Okay, so got it. I got this. So I looked at all the different textbooks. I read all I went to all these workshops. I had people videotape me when I was presenting. That's an awful thing, to sit through your own presentations. And why do I sound so weird? But I went through this. This was my job. And I got to a point where I said, okay, I mean, I think all of you, who feels really comfortable being on stage? You seek that. Okay, I see 4 hands. Most people will say, it's kind of uncomfortable. It's getting out of your comfort zone, right? But it's a job. I learned the skills, and through practice, it became kind of a natural thing that I did. And then I learned a very hard lesson. Communicating is not just about getting on stage and talking at people, right? And how did I learn this lesson? In a very hard way. So this is something that a former colleague, a senior executive at the organization that I was working at, said to me. He kind of quietly came up to me when he heard about the struggles I was going through on my project. And he said, you know, complexity in the science, simplicity in the solution. I'm like, okay, tell me more. So let me explain what he meant. One of my first projects as a credit scoring analyst was for a bank in Mexico. Mexico had just gone through a privatization of their banking industry, right? And before you all Google and figure out what year that was many, many years ago, so don't bother. I did say it was one of my first projects. So what does it mean to go through a privatization? It means that the banks were now profit-driven. They wanted to figure out how to make better decisions, to make more money, to gain more customers, et cetera, et cetera. What that meant for my company is that they needed the latest technology, the latest tools. They wanted to make better decisions through data. Okay, perfect. And as I always did, I signed up for the most challenging projects. So I got put as the lead analyst on this project. It was very visible. I think my company had maybe 250 people there, so it's a small company, and everybody was watching this project. Why? Because it would be the first empirically derived model to be used by this bank, and maybe even in the country, right? So it was very exciting. So what it means to go from decisions that I've made judgmentally and manually to the first empirically derived scoring models, or decisions using scoring models, it meant that data was going to be really difficult to collect, right? So we thought, okay, the data has to come from all the branches across the country. They were in paper form, so they needed to be sent. We got boxes and boxes of paper documents sent to our company, and we had a data entry staff that typed everything in. So applicants' information came from paper documents. We had the payment history come from the master file. And then this was also, just to make it a little bit more challenging, it was the first time that credit bureau data was being used in these models. So we were mapping out what the timeline would be and said, oh, you can't wait a year to get your hands on these models. We're going to deliver an expert model to get you started. So what we did, I forgot to advance it. What we did was we phased the model into 2 phases. The first phase was an expert model that we developed and delivered. They implemented it right away while we got phase 2 going. Okay, and the phase 2 started with a very, very long data collection step. And then what we did was, I think it actually took about a year for all the data to be captured, and the models took almost no time, relatively speaking. And it was a beautiful model, if I may say so. And I was so excited to come to the delivery meeting and present them. I had stacks and stacks of slides that explained what the models were doing and how it was delivered. And guess what happened at the end of the meeting? Yeah, you guessed it. They're going, I don't understand. I don't know how this thing works. I don't know what my staff is going to do with this. You have to teach my staff on how you develop the models. And I was bombarded with body language, resistance, just pushback. And then I spent probably another 6 months to explain why these models had to be implemented ASAP. But the resistance was because they fell in love with the expert model. Right? So how could this happen? So let me just describe to you what we did to deliver the expert model. So it took 2 days compared to the almost 2 years that phase 2 models took. It took 2 days to develop these expert models. I literally showed up at their offices, sat with all their executives, their credit policy people, their credit analysts, and I asked them questions. How do you make decisions today? And then I told stories. Well, that's interesting because when I worked with a bank in Greece, that's kind of similar to what you're telling me, but different in these ways. So I went, without data, I went into storytelling, and I went into asking questions, and I showed curiosity, and I brought them into the process. I made each of their points of views and experience relevant. So of course, at the end of the meeting, everybody felt like this was their model, and they were ready to implement. But to make things a little bit more fun, and this was a little bit risky, I had everybody score themselves out on the model. So I was hoping that the most senior person in the room would get the highest score. And I was so relieved that he did, because that sealed the deal. They said, okay, we have to implement this ASAP, right? So this is the model that took just merely a meeting and a half that they were clinging on to and refusing to replace with the multi-segment scoring system, with the latest technology, with the latest data, right? Evidence-based model, and they were clinging on to this expert model, uncomfortable, right, to make that change. So what did I learn? Like the senior executive said, complexity in the science, simplicity in the solution, right? The science will always be very complex, but you need to be able to, in absence of people who kind of understood every step of the way, you need to make them feel comfortable. You need to bring them in. You need to be curious about how they do their business, right? And you need to facilitate their involvement in the whole process. And so what I thought was that soft skills was all about doing great presentations and like wowing them with how smart the team is. It's really all these soft skills, right? It's all these skills, which I had to use because I didn't have data. But the learning is, even when you have data and you use the latest and greatest techniques, that's when you actually have to use a lot of these skills. It's even more important. So that was a really hard lesson, because every day that these new models didn't go in, it cost them money, right? And remember, I said everybody was watching this project, so it was like really hard lesson that I learned. So everybody says that it's important. Sorry, this is really sticky. Everybody says it's important to explain the why behind AI and translate the results in a way that people understand, the stakeholders. They need to understand, but not the science that got to the output, but how the output would change their lives. And it's really easy to say, it's difficult to learn, right? You need to think about who needs to know, right? Why do they need to know? What are their roles in the organization? And how do I speak their language? So I spent a lot of time from that point on really thinking about them first and not having so many slides about what I did, because it really didn't matter unless they accept what you did and actually start using it. I love this quote because so many times people have said, oh yeah, explain it like you would explain it to your mother. Well, first of all, my mother is one of the smartest people I know, right? So that's rude. And it's not about dumbing things down, right? It really isn't. It takes really smart communication skills to communicate, to be understood, to influence, to convince them, and have them take action. So these are what are called soft skills, which, by the way, I don't understand that. I think we need to call that something else, like critical skills, essential skills, right? And especially since AI is being adopted across industries and it's impacting every one of you. I don't care what your title is, right? These are the skills that we really need to teach our starting from young students and throughout the career. I'm still learning these skills, right? So the next thing I want to talk about is a little bit, in my opinion, kind of the next level of essential skills. Every time I say soft skills, just shout out, say stop, okay? Because I'm trying not to say that. Relationship building, empathy, and negotiation. And these skills were just the next level, and I actually realized that I had a lot to learn from my partners in sales, right? So as I advanced in my career, I stopped doing the projects myself. I started to take on leadership roles. I led teams around the world. I led product management and finally led a line of business, right? And so I worked much closer with my sales counterparts. So the next lesson that I learned is what I kept on hearing from my sales partners. You are always selling, okay? So show of hands, please. Who works for organizations that are selling products or services to businesses or consumers directly? Like a third of you, right? Now keep your hands up. Tell me who actually sells, who's involved in selling those products and services? Okay, most of the hands went down. Some in the corner here are still getting very actively involved in selling, right? Okay, you can put it down. So it's the majority for those of you who can't see. And what I learned is no matter what you do for your company, you're always selling. And tell me how you feel about that statement, because I can tell you what my team said when I told them, you have to learn how to sell. You can shout out. You don't talk to customers. I'm bad at that. I'm not in sales. I like to tell the truth, and that's from a salesperson. I don't sell. I'm a data scientist. That's what the other person does, right? Hard lesson to learn, right? Because as a leader, as you all advance in your career and take on leadership skills, guess what? You are selling, right? You may not be compensated for deals that you close, but you are selling. Because selling is at the next level of communication skills. You have to build relationships. You have to negotiate so that when the deal gets done, both parties feel really good about it, right? You find that point where, oh, this is actually, we got to do this, right? I got to implement this really quickly. So all the things that salespeople have to do, you have to do as a leader. You're inspiring people. You're getting them to act, right? You're creating change, and a lot of people don't like change. You have to make them feel comfortable. You have to build trust, and you have to work with people who resist, right? With empathy. But you have to be resolute in why we have to change, right? So as the future of work is continually changing with Gen AI, I'm even more convinced that these are the skills, the essential skills that you need to lean into. And these skills are not necessarily taught in classrooms. I can tell you, I got presentation skills 101 to do 10 minutes of presentation in my graduate program. That's it, right? So I was not prepared to go into the real world. And these skills are not necessarily taught by your managers either. These skills, think about all the people who tell you complexity in the science, simplicity in the solution. Listen out for those advice around you. Oftentimes, these mentors are not going to present themselves as, I'm your mentor, right? Let's spend some time together. It's not like that. Keep your mind open. Look for those nuggets of advice. Seek to learn with every interaction from somebody who is in a different role. Okay? And so I learned my mentors over time. Yes, they were my managers. They were those executives who wanted to help me out. They're my sales partners who together we got deals done. They were my office mates and my teammates. And most importantly, they were my clients, right? So listen and be observant about how the world looks in their shoes. At a Stanford event earlier this year, we had a few students talk about their research. And afterwards, they were asked to sit on a panel. And actually, Shauna asked them a question. She said, what or who influenced you to go into your field? And there was one common answer, and that is, well, somebody took interest in me. Somebody noticed that I was good in math, good in science, and that somebody supported me and encouraged me to stay in the field, right? Those are your mentors, and one of them actually said in middle school, as early as that. So I have a call to action. Be a mentor. My early days, my earliest memories of mentor was actually in Germany. My teacher noticed that I was struggling in school because I didn't speak German. It's kind of understandable. I was still struggling to learn the language, but she noticed that I was good in math. So she spent extra time with me and pushed me, got me to be really good in math and stand out in the class. And that gave me the confidence that I needed. It happens early. And there are so many ways you can actually do that by getting involved at WIDS. Sign up as an ambassador, host an event, tutor a high school student at a WIDS Next Gen workshop. Sign up for our favorite Career Catalyst. If working at a workshop, tutoring a high school student is too much time commitment, go ahead and sign up on our Career Catalyst. Spend 30 minutes talking to somebody who would love to ask you for advice. Be a mentor, because this is what WIDS is about. We are a community that inspires and supports everyone, not just women, in shaping the future of data science and AI. Thank you very much, and have a great conference.